Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I wanted to try making a Thaumaturge character from the new Dark Archive for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I do enjoy doing like character creation videos, and I've done a few in the past for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, so I did kind of skip some of the steps starting out here for the purposes of just trying to make this video go a little bit quickly here. So what I want to just do is kind of show the cheat sheet that I have to start with character creation. It is a work in progress. There's a few things that I forgot to fill in on the sheet or leave spots for. But again, these are things that we can sort of always update and adjust, and at some point I might try to make this available somehow. So what we have here are just our attributes. So we have our ability scores of strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. They all start with a base number of 10. So this is something that when I go back to revise this, I'm going to make sure that I actually put the 10s in each of those columns. Then we have our bonuses and flaws for our ancestry. So a bonus or a boost in Pathfinder 2nd Edition is a +2 bonus to an attribute. Most ancestries will give you 2 specific ones and then a free one which you can put into any of the other attributes that weren't boosted by your ancestry. So for example, the Goblin, I chose to make a Goblin Thaumaturge. So goblins get a +2 to dexterity and a boost, which is a +2 to charisma, and then they get a flaw, which is a -2 penalty to their wisdom. Now with this class, they are kind of a combination of like a secondary fighter type, but they rely on sort of their innate abilities and some knowledge stuff. So I didn't want the -2 penalty to the wisdom to start off with, so I put their free boost into wisdom as well, so that sort of canceled that out. So it starts with 10, and then +2, -2. For background, I chose Scholar. I thought that that would be the one that works best for to go along with the class. The Thaumaturge basically does like a lot of research, is sort of a repository of esoteric lore, and they use their knowledge of various creatures and what their weaknesses are to be able to exploit that, to be able to deal like additional damage against them, either if they have like a natural weakness like a lycanthrope with silver, or they can use something to create a personalized weakness that they can exploit in a very specific individual, which we'll take a look at here in a moment. But with the Scholar background, they do get a they get a boost, so a +2 bonus to either intelligence or wisdom. And I wanted to have at least a boost into intelligence because, again, some of their knowledge skills are based off intelligence, some of them are based off of wisdom, so I put that one there. And then with the free one, I just put that into their charisma because that is the class's primary ability score. So the class gives you a boost, a +2 bonus into the class's primary ability score. So again, charisma for the case of the Thaumaturge. And then when you're finishing up your attributes, you get 4 boosts that you can apply to any 4 attributes. So I went with strength, con, and then I put wisdom and charisma. So essentially what I worked out with is 12s in all 5 of the attributes until we get to charisma, which has an 18. So they get at least a +1 bonus in every ability score, and they get their +4 bonus on their charisma. So for hit points, they get 6 from their ancestry, 8 from the class, and they do get 1 from their con. Again, I will be adjusting this to add the con modifier in here as well. So that is going to give us 15 total. Now for skills, I just wrote down the ones that they get automatically, because if you get training in a skill from multiple sources, you just have one of them, and then if the second source, you essentially get to choose whichever skill that you want. The background gave me the ability to choose one of the knowledge skills, so I went with occultism, and you automatically gain the academia lore skill as well. The class gave you automatic training in arcana, nature, religion, and occultism, but because I already had occultism from my background, I was able to choose a different skill, which I chose survival. And the heritage that I took, the feat that I took for my ancestry for the Goblin, which I took Goblin lore, that gave me training in both stealth and I believe the nature skill as well. So I decided, because I already had knowledge in nature, I just took society instead. So I have automatic training in stealth, society, occultism, academia, lore, arcana, nature, religion, and survival. And then I was given four other training in four other skills based off of my intelligence modifier and the bonuses that you get for the Thaumaturge class. So I filled in basically all that information already. We're going to be making a goblin called Rumpel, and he's a goblin with the Iron Gut heritage. He's a scholar, Thaumaturge class, small size, neutral good alignment. His traits are goblinoid and humanoid, or goblin and humanoid. And then we've got the attributes here. So +1 modifiers for strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, and a +4 modifier for charisma. And then 12 for the strength through wisdom. And then we have an 18 charisma. We're obviously trained in our own class DC because every class is at first level. The Thaumaturge is an expert in fortitude, an expert in will, and trained in reflex. So I've got all those numbers factored in. Again, remember, if you are trained in something in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, your proficiency bonus is equal to 2 plus your level. So at first level, that is going to give a trained proficiency level a +3 proficiency bonus. And if you are an expert in something, it gives you a 4 plus your level. So at first level, 4 plus your level gives us +5. So our fortitude and will saving throws are both at +6, and our reflex, which we're only trained in, we have a +3 proficiency bonus, +1 for dex, which is going to give us a +4 total. We are an expert in perception, so the +5 for proficiency bonus, +1 for the wisdom modifier, gives us a total of +6, and we have a dark vision as well as a 25-foot speed. And then for the other skills, I chose athletics because that's usually something that comes up not often, but often enough. I also took diplomacy and intimidation and medicine as the other 4 skills that I could just choose to be trained in. And I just filled in the basic feat information for our background and our ancestry. So now we're going to take a look at the Thaumaturge class because we got the basic stuff out of the way here. So let's move the core rulebook out of the way here. All right, so the Thaumaturge. So we have, like I said, charisma, we have our hit points, we've got all of our information that we have there. We are trained in simple martial weapons as well as light and medium armor. And so the reasons that the things that the Thaumaturge can do during combat encounters: use your implements and diverse arsenal of mystic tools and tricks to assist you in combat, always presenting the right bane to exploit enemies' weaknesses or shield your allies against the supernatural. During social encounters, you understand and nudge the social connections between people, much as you strive to understand the larger ties between mysteries and concepts. This helps you find common ground when negotiating between the mundane and supernatural, or even to play one side against another. So again, that's why I took diplomacy. I thought about taking deception, but I thought maybe intimidation, because the Thaumaturge knows so much about these mysticism and stuff along those lines, that they might know ways to threaten, and the fact that they can create their own weakness in somebody, which we'll see a little bit later on. I just thought that intimidate might just be a more natural skill for them to be trained in. While exploring, you investigate unexplainable phenomenon around you, taking appropriate precautions to ward yourself and your allies against paranormal threats. Where necessary, you create your own path through the unknown. And then in downtime, says you research deeper into the supernatural mysteries you discovered on your last adventure, to see how they can be applied to the future. You dust off relics, cultivate herbs, or forge trinkets, updating your collection of scavenged supernatural tools. After each new threat you encounter, you return or call in favors with other people, strange creatures, and mystical forces. It says here you might prepare for the worst while improvising as necessary and pressing your allies. When you're able to handle anything that fate throws at you, you might assume everything is connected on a deeper level rather than be content with what you find on the surface, or you might obsess over a certain supernatural phenomenon, attempting to tie it back, trying to tie everything back to it. And others probably look at you to learn the weaknesses of a supernatural threat when one rears its head. Even when your explanations are invented on the fly, they just seem to work. I kind of like that. Others probably rely on you to come up with a solution when the situation seems hopeless, or others probably mistake you for a common wizard or magician. Now, I don't think they get actual spell casting in this class. The psychic class did get spell casting, but they do get some abilities here that we're going to sort of look through. So again, we have our ancestry and background stuff, initial proficiencies, which we've already listed, and then they get esoteric lore as a starting feature. So it says your experience with the unknown, as well as the tales you've exchanged with other thaumaturges, has taught you about strange phenomenon of every kind. You become trained in the esoteric lore, a special lore skill that can be used to recall knowledge regarding haunts, curses, and creatures of any type, but that can't be used to recall knowledge of other topics. Unlike a normal lore skill, you use charisma as your modifier for the esoteric lore checks. You also gain the dubious knowledge skill feat, so we got to put that in there as well. We're not worried about third level yet because we don't have that here yet. Then we get our first implement in esoterica. So it says your implement is a special object of symbolic importance, your badge, as you treat with the supernatural, and a powerful tool if things turn violent. Choose an implement from the options presented on page 36. So an amulet, bell, chalice, lantern, mirror, regalia, tome, wand, and weapon. So you choose between those. You begin play with a mundane item of that type, and you gain the initiate benefit for that implement. While an implement is useful to you, it typically has no value if sold. If you acquire a new object of the same general implement or implement type, you can switch your implement to the new object by spending 1 day of downtime with the new item. As you advance as a thaumaturge, you will collect up to 3 implements and unlock hidden potential stored within each. You can mix and match their benefits to suit your situation. While your implements are your primary tools in your dealings with the supernatural, you know the value of always being prepared. You constantly collect and carry various smaller, I'm trying to read this through like obstructions here. Smaller mystic objects, bits of materials with paranormal affinities, and items used in folk practices. Your esoterica, these might be they might include cold iron nails, scraps of scrolls and scriptures, fragments of bones purported from a saint, and other similar objects like slivers of silver, maybe a sprig of wolfsbane, stuff like that. You keep your esoterica in easy-to-access places on your person and are practiced in brandishing your implement and esoterica together, so you can draw and use esoterica with the same hand you use to wield an implement. So again, we'll get into that a little bit more. And then you get the exploit vulnerability feature as well. So you know that every creature, no matter how obscure, has a weakness. By identifying and empowering the right object, you can strike down even the most resilient monsters. You gain the exploit vulnerability action. So it is a one action, it uses one of your 3 actions in combat. You can use it once per round. It does require that you are holding your implement. So it says you scour your experiences and learning to identify something you might repel, or that might repel your foe. You retrieve an object from your esoterica with the appropriate supernatural qualities. Then use your implement to stoke the remnants of its power into a blaze. Select a creature you can see and attempt an esoteric lore check against a standard DC for its level. As you retrieve the right object from your esoterica and use your implement to empower it, you gain the following effects until you exploit vulnerabilities again. So on a critical success, it says you remember the creature's weaknesses, and as you empower your esoterica, you have a flash of insight that grants even more knowledge about the creature. You learn all of the creature's resistances, weaknesses, and immunities, including the amounts of the resistances and the weaknesses, and any unusual weaknesses or vulnerabilities, such as what spells will pass through a golem's anti-magic. So that's kind of cool. You can exploit either the creature's mortal weakness or a personal antithesis, which we'll see below. Your unarmed and weapon strikes against the creature also become magical if they weren't already. So that's, with a regular success, you recall an important fact about the creature, learning its highest weakness, or one of its highest weaknesses if it has multiple of the same value, but not its other weaknesses, resistances, or immunities. You can exploit either the creature's mortal weaknesses or personal antithesis. Your unarmed, again, your unarmed weapon strikes, your unarmed or weapon strikes, become magical if they weren't already. If you fail, failing to recall a salient weakness about the creature, you instead attempt to exploit a more personal vulnerability. So even on a failure, you can still sort of get something here. You can exploit only the creature's personal antithesis. Your unarmed and weapon strikes against the creature also become magical if they weren't already. And on a critical failure, you couldn't find the right object to use and become distracted while you rummage through your esoterica. You become flat-footed until the beginning of your next turn. So that's kind of cool. So even on a failed check, you still get a benefit. It's really only the critical failure that's the word, like the actual, like really detrimental one. So again, you can exploit either their mortal weakness or their personal antithesis. So for mortal weakness, after identifying a creature's weakness, you use a thematically resonant bit of esoterica to attune your attacks to the discovery. Your unarmed and weapon strikes activate the highest weakness you discovered with the exploit vulnerability, even though the damage type your weapon deals doesn't change. This damage affects the target of your exploit vulnerability, as well as any other creatures of the same type. So again, if it's a lycanthrope, it can work against all lycanthropes during that encounter, as well as any creatures of the exact same type, but not other creatures with the same weaknesses. So for example, when fighting a pack of werewolves, you might use silver shavings or crushed moonstone to deal damage that applies their weakness to silver to your attacks against any werewolves, but you wouldn't apply this damage to any other monsters with a weakness to silver. So it's kind of cool if you're fighting a pack of, say, like were-rats, then that's great. But if it's like were-rats and maybe like a vampire, the silver doesn't carry over. And then personal antithesis. So this is the other one. So this is the one that you can do even on a fail. So it says you improvise a custom weakness on a piece of esoterica that repels it on an individual level. For instance, against a tyrant, you might produce a broken chain that once held a captive. This causes the target creature, and only the target creature, to gain a weakness against your unarmed and weapon strikes equal to 2 plus half your level. So again, that's really cool stuff. Then you get your implement's empowerment. So the power of your implement can also be turned to the more common task of combat. Its power adding to and amplifying the effects of runes and other magical empowerments. When you strike, you can trace mystic patterns with an implement you're holding to empower the strike, causing it to deal 2 additional damage per weapon die. Channeling the power requires full use of your hands. You don't gain the benefits of the implement's empowerment if you're holding anything in the other hand other than a single one-handed weapon, other implements, or esoterica. And you must be holding at least one implement to gain the benefit. So again, you can, it looks like as part of a strike. So this is actually not an additional action, which is kind of interesting. I like the way that that's kind of handled. So you get to just do it, and you get to do the extra, additional 2 damage per weapon damage dice. That's not bad. Then we get our Thaumaturge feats, which is the last thing that we're kind of looking at for first level. So let's just go ahead. We're going to skip ahead a little bit here. We're going to take a look at implements let's take a look at implements. So we get amulets, bells, chalices. Then we also can choose from lanterns, mirrors, regalia, tomes, wands, or weapons. So I think because I kind of focused a lot on the on like you get a focus on like the knowledge skills, and I chose the scholar background. I think the one that I kind of want to use the most. I mean, they're all kind of interesting. I'm not going to lie, but I think the one that I'm going to choose is actually going to be the tome. So that's the one that we're going to focus on for the purposes of this video. So it says tome implements embody lost knowledge and otherworldly insights. While a weathered book is most common, tome implements can have many different form factors, as they are ways to store knowledge. From carved clay tablets to bundles of knotted cords, tome implements are associated with the harrow suit of books in the astrological signs of the stargazer and the underworld dragon, which I'm not going to get into in this video because I don't think it's that pertinent. But the initiate benefit that we get for the tome implement says that while you hold your tome, lines of text appear on open pages revealing useful information. While you hold your tome, you gain a +1 circumstance bonus to all skill checks to recall knowledge. During your daily preparations, you can gain the trained proficiency rank in 2 skills of your choice until you prepare again. You retain the benefit as long as the tome is on your person, even if you aren't holding it. In a 3rd level, it becomes expert, and a 5th level, at 3rd level you become expert in one of them and trained in the other. At 5th level you become an expert in both. So that's, again, we've got a lot of skills that we're trained in, and this just gives us the ability to train in a couple of more. So we could take, deception or crafting or even thievery if we need to. So that's the one we're going to go with. We're going to go with the tome. And let's take a look at our 1st level Thaumaturge feats to see if there's anything that might come in handy here. I'm kind of leaning towards the diverse lore feat. So the diverse lore says your wandering studies mean you've heard rumors or theories about almost every topic, though admittedly the sources aren't always the most reliable. You can take a -2 penalty to your check to recall knowledge with esoteric lore, to recall knowledge about any topic, not just the usual topics available for the esoteric lore. So again, that kind of expands that out so that I can use my charisma bonus instead. And even though I'm taking a -2, the tome gives me a +1 to recall knowledge checks, and I would still have a higher attribute, so it still works as a net gain. So I think that's the one that I'm going to go with. It says, additionally, when you succeed at your check to exploit a vulnerability, compare the result of your esoteric lore check to the DC to recall knowledge for that creature. If that number would be a success or critical success, you gain the information as if you had succeeded on the recall knowledge. So yeah, that's what we're going to go with. So we're going to go with the tome. We are going to go with the diverse lore feat, and we're just going to go and equip our characters. So I hope that gives you kind of an idea of what the Thaumaturge can do. So again, they are really great at sort of dealing with creatures exploiting their vulnerabilities, kind of always knowing ways to weaken their foes, which again, I think that's a really cool concept. You get to deal extra damage with your attacks. It's a really cool class overall, and I love just having the ability to deal to exploit the weakness, to be able to effectively target a creature's weakness on a successful roll. That's really cool. I like that. So if a creature's vulnerable to cold or again silver weapon traits, you'll be able to do that even if you don't actually have the proper abilities, right? I kind of like that. But the fact that you can also, even on a failure, you can target an individual creature, so it's not as widespread, but you can target an individual creature and grant and give them a weakness that you immediately exploit. I think that's awesome. And the introduction of the implements and the way that they're handled again is really, really cool. So if you want me to go over the other implements, let me know that in the comments below as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fill out the rest of the character sheet, and I'll just show you kind of what the finished character looks like. So I'm going to do that, but so just bear with me. I will be right back, and we'll sort of finish up this video. Alright, so I got everything else filled in. The character is now technically complete. I didn't realize until I was already filling stuff out that the printer, for whatever reason, it cut off the bottoms of the sheets, but it's not a huge deal. I just kind of filled in where I needed to here. So, What we have is for equipment, I took scale armor because proficient in light or medium armor, a morning star for my melee weapon, and a hand crossbow for a ranged weapon. I took 30 bolts for the crossbow. I also took a minor potion of healing, which heals 1d8 damage, and an adventurer's pack, which is just sort of a collection of all the things that you kind of need for essentials. There's rope, there's a backpack, there's a bedroll, there's rations, all the stuff that you would sort of take by default. It's all grouped sort of into one. My encumbered rate for if I'm carrying too much stuff and it slows me down is at 6 bulk, 5 plus 1 for my strength. I am currently carrying 5 bulk, so I'm pretty close to the encumbered mark, but I'm not quite there yet, which is good. For like says for the armor class, I've got a 17. For the Morning Star, I get a +4 bonus to attack for 1d6 plus 1, bludgeoning or piercing. And for the hand crossbow, it's +4 for 1d6 piercing at a range of 60 feet and a reload action of 1 action. But the hand crossbow is a one-handed weapon, and it's important that I have a hand free in combat for utilizing things like the implement empowerment or the like exploit vulnerability and all that stuff. So you want to make sure that you've got a free hand. So that's why I went with the hand crossbow. I considered like throwing daggers or stuff like that, but I kind of like the idea of having the hand crossbow for my little goblin here. So like I said, we've got some pretty decent stuff here for just tracking certain bits of information that I couldn't fit on the main front sheet. I do have the esoteric lore skill. I would have put it in the sheet, but I already had 2 lore skills from my ancestry and my background. So I just put esoteric lore here with the final bonus, +7, 4 for charisma, and 3 for being trained proficiency level. And then for my Tome initiate, because it does allow me to choose extra skills that I can be considered to be trained in, I put deception and thievery down here because crafting, deception, performance, and thievery I do not have proficiency in. I do have proficiency in basically everything else, which is a really cool thing for this class. And again, works well with them sort of, being able to improvise stuff. I didn't want to mark them on the actual skill section just because it can change from day to day depending on what your needs might be. So I just put them here, again, with just their final bonuses. So deception, a charisma-based skill would be at +7, 4 for charisma, 3 for proficiency. And then for thievery, they get a +4, 3 for proficiency, and 1 for their dexterity. I also took a note of just what personal antithesis does, which is additional damage equal to 2 plus my level. And then I have exploit vulnerability down here, just that it is an action, and then what page it's on. For description, I just put See Dark Archive because it's a lot to sort of write down. For free actions and reactions, I just put the implements empowerment because it doesn't have a cost as far as like your action economy is concerned. So I consider that to be a free action, but it is part of a strike action, so you do have to be making a strike in order to benefit from it. But the description, you deal initial 2 damage per weapon die, which is pretty good. And that's one of the things, again, that I like about this class. So even though I'm dealing a 1d6 plus 1 in melee and 1d6 at range, because they're both using the strike action, and if I was using the exploit, exploit weakness for the personal antithesis, just for an example, and I used the implement empowerment on top of that, I could be dealing an additional +5 damage at first level. So for my melee weapon, it could be 1d6 plus 6, using all of those abilities in combination with one another. And for the hand crossbow, it could still be 1d6 plus 5, which is really cool because it doesn't state melee attack. It just says when you're doing a strike action. So awesome stuff there. So yeah, again, I just love the way that this class is structured. I like the abilities that they get. I like the fact that they focus very heavily on skills and the combination of things that I took with the scholar background, the goblin lore, ancestry feat, and the tome initiate. You taking the tome as my implement that I can use along with the esoterica, the little bits and scraps of things that can be used to exploit weaknesses in creatures or create them if they don't inherently have weaknesses for you to be able to exploit. I love the fact that the character is so well-rounded. All of the skills except for a few ones that I'm basically not trained in. I get, +4s or +7s. So yeah, really cool stuff there, and like I said, just being able to deal that extra damage is really, really cool. It does take up a couple of your actions to be able to do it, but that's still fine. Like, I think that still works really, really well. And yeah, it's just a really interesting concept, I think, for a class overall. Using your knowledge of enemies' weaknesses, or maybe their own personal histories and things that they might be kind of put off by, to create openings for you to be extra effective in combat. Just a really cool class altogether. So it's of the new classes that have been introduced pretty much since the Advanced Player's Guide has come out. I would say that the Thaumaturge is my favorite class of all of them that have been released so far. It's just such a cool concept. I really like it, and I wanted to do something to kind of show off a little bit of what you can expect, even just from a first level version of the class. They're pretty decent overall. So let me know in the comments below, what do you guys think of the Thaumaturge class, and would you like to see me do character creation videos to sort of go along with class descriptions, to sort of give you an idea of how they would look more in practice versus just describing their reading off their abilities? Let me know that in the comments below. So thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Until then, take care.